Welcome, everybody. Tonight, we're going to be working on Unit 1, and one of our primary tasks is to install the MySQL server and workbench so that we have the software that we need to do the work required in this class. So this first video that we're releasing here is basically focusing just on the install. I will say up front that I already have this stuff installed on my system, so most likely what I'll do is I'll have a student volunteer share their screen. And if all of them have it installed too, then I'll demonstrate on my other machine here, as I mentioned before, which I'll bring into the Zoom session. So if you are in the unit folder, you can scroll down here. And what I do want to point out a couple things. There's some older videos in here where I talk about the installations, and most of the stuff we're going to do here tonight is covered in these videos. There are a couple of superfluous videos here, so there's more material recorded than actually happened in a live classroom, but that's because we had issues during the classroom and the recordings got messed up, so I re-recorded them in the aftermath. That happens sometimes. I will point out all of the stuff that's in these videos as we're kind of moving forward, but right now our focus is this little entry here, which is to get MySQL and get it installed. And this is actually an assignment. So once you get it fully up and installed, you will take a screenshot of MySQL Workbench up and running and connected. And that's, basically proof that you have it, and you will earn points for that. I know this seems kind of silly. So like if you're like let's just say a IT person or a person that's pretty computer savvy and knows how to install software, like, oh my God, he's going to teach us how to install software. Yeah, but there are rights and wrongs, right? So like a lot of the consumer software that we install, we download it, and let's admit it, right? It's like download, next, I agree, install, finish, and run the software. You don't like even read the screens, right? But we're installing, at least one of the key components here is the MySQL server. And there are nuances to it that are very, very important that really can come back and bite you if you don't make the right choices. So that's why I do the videos, right? So there's more than one pathway through the install, and choosing the wrong pathway can complicate things for you later. The one thing I will say up front is if the install doesn't go well, it's very easy to uninstall and reinstall these products. They're not, they don't leave a lot of like artifacts, is a good way to say it, when you do that. The MySQL software, the server component, once we have it installed, will run memory resident on your machine automatically unless you set it up to do otherwise. That might not be what you want. I'm telling you that up front. Like if your machine is running and you're not doing MySQL work, why have your server running is my mindset. But a lot of people don't want to think about it, so they just leave it on. So I'm just telling you that. But it does consume system resources, and everything that you're running in the background that's consuming system resources slows down your system, right? So yeah, that's why I mention it. Now I have in this posting here a bunch of information. So the first thing that I will say is that we have install instructions that came from basically this website, MySQL Tutorial. It's one of the websites we really like a lot. I do want to point out also that another website I like a lot for MySQL content is Tutorials Point. And I will share links from some of these sites, in lieu of the fact that we don't have a textbook these days. They have an installation section, and MySQL Tutorial has an installation section as well. I'm following the instructions that are available here on this site, and then I've basically summarized those instructions in this document. A couple of you did the install already and clicked this link, didn't find the document, let me know about it. And I apologize, I took so long to fix the link, but I also didn't want you guys rushing ahead and installing, not knowing what you're doing. So that's one of the reasons I sort of delayed it as well. If you want, you can follow along with this document. So you can just click the link. It'll pull down the Word doc, or is this a Google Doc, whatever, either way. And then you can follow the steps here. So if you're doing this, let's say you're just listening to me right now in the video and you're not really doing the work, you can always watch this later and kind of like, or read this later and kind of use it as a guide. Generally, what we're being guided to do is to install these pieces of software. And I want you to notice it's a comprehensive list. It's not just one piece of software. It's really a collection of software. Some of this stuff we absolutely need. Some of the stuff we'll say is questionable that you need it. In fact, I'm going to dissuade you from installing some things. It doesn't mean you have to make that choice, but I'm just telling you, if your hard drive space is at a premium, I wouldn't go rushing to, like, for example, install the documentation, because that consumes a lot of space. Also, that very last bullet that they have there, the connectors, those are useful if you plan on coding in other languages. So, for example, if I'm coding in Java or C Sharp or Python, and I'm writing a program that's interfacing with the database, and I need the connection script and the connection, what they call connectors in code, on the server side, you would select to install those. You can add those later as well. So from a practical sense, like if you're a web student, you're going to work in Python, PHP, and Java. If you're an AI data analytics student, the only connector you need is Python, pretty much. So these are just things to be mindful of. So like if you're presented with a library of 500 connectors, you don't need to connect them all. It's not necessary. And a lot of people make the mistake. It's like, okay, I'll just install everything, and then they wonder why their hard drive is full. So that's why I point that out. So our primary focus is to get these two products. We'll bring this one along for the ride because it kind of ends up there anyhow. It's really part of the server in a sense, but these are the three key pieces that we're installing. There is a link here on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and follow that link right now and just take you right to the MySQL website. And I do want you guys to notice that we're on the download page of that site. So we're skipping like the home page and all that stuff. But if you look at the root URL here, right, and you go to that root URL, you can go to the home page for MySQL. I did mention this last time. MySQL is basically a variant of the Oracle database system. Oracle is this huge IT company out in California that also is responsible for the Java programming language and a lot of other very key technological technologies. MySQL is free. The Oracle database is not. Most of the internet is powered by MySQL, and a lot of people like it because it has enterprise level features and it doesn't cost any money, right? So a lot of people use it. There is another database system that a lot of people who use MySQL also use, which is called Maria database or MariaDB, which is a clone of MySQL. And I've noticed that a lot of web hosting platforms now are switching to it, by the way, which I think is interesting. So if you were looking for an alternative to MySQL, because I don't know, you hate Oracle Corporation for some reason, you can go to the Maria database and run a lot of the same stuff. It doesn't come with all the tools that MySQL does, though, right? So we're using their product suite with intention here. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I would like to get a student volunteer to share their screen. So I'm just going to pause for a moment while we get that set up. All right, so I am currently having one of the students share their screens, and they are on a Windows machine, as you can see. They're at the MySQL download page. You'll notice that there are a couple of different options here for installing, and I want you to notice that there is a difference. So one is you notice the difference in the file size. And I'm going to draw on your screen, Joe. So one's only 2 megs and the other one's 300 megs. So the essential difference here is that the top one is an installer package that will then download all the products and install them dynamically. The second one will download all the files and then unzip them to install them. So, they're roughly equivalent. On a Windows machine, I wouldn't have much preference to take one over the other. Joe, last time you did this, which one did you choose? The top one. Okay, go with that one again. So just hit the download button and then, yep. Now, one thing I will say, when you're downloading this, because it comes from the Oracle website, they will try to get you to register for an account, which you can do. It's free if you use your student email account. So it's got a .edu at the end. There's no cost for the software. It just helps them to track. And real frankly, I think that's a pretty fair trade. You give me a free piece of software. Here's my email address. Not a big deal, right? And use the student one for sure. Once you have the installer downloaded, go ahead and click it from your downloads there to run it. All right. And what I'm going to caution all of you to do here, because as I've said a couple times now while we've been paused, we all have this hasty approach when we install software that we just want to get the software running. So we always say next, 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 I agree, and move on. This does have nuances. We want to be very, very careful about what we choose here. Not that you can't fix it, but it's easier to set it correctly to start with. And I also want to explain what they mean as we go through it, because some of you might be completely unaware, relative to how new you are to this type of thing. All right. So we basically have the key products here. And I want you to notice that right now, the way they have it set up, this would download everything that was on that bullet list I showed you before, including the documentation and all the connectors. That's not really what we want. All right, so let's do a little bit of this. There's these little plus marks here. I'd like you to expand those if you could, Joe. And you'll notice like what's involved here. So we have the server, workbench, and the shell. Those are the three key pieces we want. Notice I really don't want the router. The documentation's online, so I put it on your machine. And samples and examples, I can live without those too. Right. So the grand goal is then to highlight each one of these products. So click on MySQL Server. Okay, that's the shell. So go up a couple. There you go. And then hit the arrow to move it over. If it's not going over, expand, find the product inside there. Yes, and you do want the latest one. Now, Joe, I know you're moving pretty quick, so I can tell you, you're pretty adept at doing this kind of stuff. With MySQL Workbench, same thing. We want that product. Don't worry about versions there. Just click the title of the
This
product.
one's the one that was broken on the end install.
Yeah, don't worry about it too much. It'll over install it just fine. So there you go. Click the top one if you can. There you go.
No, it still won't.
It still won't. Okay. So you're gonna have to do a separate install of that.
Yep.
All right. So this is wonderful. Take the latest version of the shell. And that's all we want. All right. So ideally you would have Workbench. So we're gonna have to do a separate download of that. What I would challenge you to do, Joe, so this is kind of a weird example, is you'll probably have to go into your add remove programs and find it there and remove it.
I can do that.
Okay. Don't do that right now though, but do that in the aftermath. Let's get this server and the shell running. So go ahead and click next. All right. You see the two installs are listed. Just go ahead and click execute and it'll start running them. You can see the progress. I mean, you have a pretty fast machine, so it's not taking very long to do this, which is great.
It's only fast until you tell it it's fast.
Right. It gets to 99% and then it takes 100% more time. Now, kind of interestingly, most software installations these days tend to be files being unzipped for the most part, mostly. Now, one thing you should know, the shell program, that's the command line program of MySQL. That one's actually a pretty large piece of software because the command line program can do everything the graphical program can do pretty much. Just a matter of knowing how. So lots of little files being unzipped, which is why it takes so long. All right, go ahead and click next. All right. This is one of those screens where I want you to pause for just a moment, and I want you guys to look at what selections you're making on the screen and not to hurry past the screen at all. You want to read what it says super carefully. So the first thing that you want to look at is the server configuration type, that drop down box. And if you don't mind, hit the drop down and let's take a look at the options there, right? All right. So notice the three different options. So if I was actually installing this piece of software on a server that was like in a server rack, I would choose that. And that's not what we're doing here, right? Because you're using this as a general purpose computing device, including, playing Battlefield on it or whatever games you're playing, right? It's also not a dedicated computer. So it's not a computer that's only going to run the database. So this is a development computer. What's the other option? There's one more at the bottom of the list we're not seeing. And what does that say? It says manual, right? So I'm going to say that you want to go with development computer. And what does that say in terms of options? Like when you hit that box, can you read the box to us? Like hit
Where
the drop down again. There you go.
it's pretty much minimizing the amount of memory it will use.
And that's appropriate at our level. All right, so let's just go with that option. Then the other thing is the connectivity, and I want you guys to notice here, because we're going to be running a piece of server software. The way a server works, typically when we connect to servers, they're all on the internet somewhere, or they're somewhere on our network, like in a closet in the building somewhere. Now we're running a server locally on our machine. It will run over the TCP/IP network, which is the internet network, and it runs on a particular port address. And this is kind of interesting information. So if you're new to IT, this is a weird concept. But whenever we have a network connection to the internet with TCP/IP, TCP/IP has 65,536 ports it can use, or channels, like on a TV set. That's kind of weird, right? And so every application that runs over the internet uses a very particular port to do its transmission. So, for example, if I'm using a web browser, it uses port 80. That's the typical port. If it's email, it uses a different port. If it's FTP, it uses a different port. And guess what? MySQL database connections use port 3306 by default, right? Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about that is you can customize. If you don't want it using that port, you can switch it. However, that's the standard port for MySQL, so I wouldn't go changing it. The only reason you would want to change it in this circumstance is you're running another instance of MySQL on your machine on that port already, or something else is using that port. Chances are the software that's installing it would detect that problem and notify you. But it's something to be mindful of. Okay, so any machine on your network, if this port's opened up through your firewall, can connect to your database on that port. So it's kind of an interesting thought. Notice that there's a couple other options there we're not going to even mess with. There's a named pipe and the shared memory location, and those are what we call Microsoft specific type of technologies where you can use the name pipe, for example, in your code instead of the IP address, and it kind of goes down this whole rabbit hole. Let's go ahead and click next. Go to the next screen here. And this is another spot where you have to make a very careful choice. The recommended choice is probably the best one, but it is possible that you can use other approaches for different reasons. And I want to be really careful here. And I'm going to pause the recording for a second because my brain is telling me to be careful that I don't make the wrong choice here. So just a moment forward here. All right. So I just wanted to be sure that we were making the right choice there. But yeah, use that top option. Now, here's the thing I'm going to tell you guys right now. They want you to use a strong password. So there are going to be some password requirements here. But I'm just warning you now, if you lose this password, you cannot control that server. So this is not a server that's really going to be accessible to the outside world. So I wouldn't worry about necessarily obscuring your password. But whatever you do, there's nothing I can do to help you retrieve it. This is all on you. So, like, whatever password you come up with, you make sure that you know it. I would make record of it, whether it's in a password manager or a text file or something. So just be mindful of that, because I have had students lose work when they couldn't retrieve their MySQL passwords. So come up with a password here and type it in, and then repeat it, and then make note of the password. That is a mighty long password. Oop, try it again. Yeah, one of those isn't right.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Okay. Notice how it's saying we probably one upper, one lower, one number, and one. Now, just because it says week doesn't mean it's not acceptable, by the way.
A lot of the time, length helps a lot more than characters.
Agreed. It's just flagging it as weak. It doesn't mean it's bad. So go ahead and click next. All right. Now that password that you created is for what we call the root account, and the username for that account is root, ROOT, all lowercase. So just be mindful of that. This screen here will configure MySQL Server as a Windows service, meaning it runs in the background. And notice how the checkbox, the second checkbox says Start MySQL Server at System Startup. That is your choice. While you're taking this class, I think that's a good choice. You can flip it so it does not automatically do that, and I can show you that in the aftermath. And Joe, you're making the choice to not run it automatically. Do you know how to get into the services and turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I trust you to do that. The other thing is, and it says run Windows service as a standard system account. I would recommend that. All right. Server file permissions. Yes, choose the top box. All right. And then if you hit execute, it'll complete all those steps. And Joe, I'm kind of keeping in mind that you still have the MySQL Workbench issue. So when this is done and running, we'll have to circle back and look at just that product. So you might
All right.
personally have to go through an uninstall and reinstall. So go ahead and click finish. All right. Okay, sounds good to me. And now it's launching the product. And just to double check that the Windows server or the SQL server is running in the background, if you can go to your taskbar and bring up your task manager and go to the services tab. And then you should find it under the M's if it's alphabetical. There it is. And you'll notice how it's running. If you can give that a right click, I just want you guys, and you don't have to change its status, but I just want to show you guys, if you guys are in Windows and you want to stop, start, restart that server, that's how you do it. And if it doesn't start automatically, then you have to come into this panel to get it to run. And that's my configuration currently on my machine. Mine is manual to turn on. Joe made the same choice, but at the end of the install, he also chose to start it. Now, Joe, could you do me a favor and see if you can access MySQL Workbench from your start menu? See if it's listed there. Okay, looks like it's there. Let's see if it launches. Excellent. All right. So Notice that there's a box inside this welcome screen that you get with MySQL Workbench. And just to explain the difference, the MySQL server is the thing that runs in the background. MySQL Workbench is the tool, the database management system that allows us to interface with that server. There's a tile that's pre-created on this screen, and you'll notice it's set up for the root account and local host. That means your own machine on port 3306. So if you click that tile, it now will ask you for your password. And my recommendation is you're working locally, I would save the password personally, but you don't have to. You can type it in every time if that makes you happy. With that many characters in the password, I would click save password. That's just me, right? And now you can see Joe is successfully inside the product. And Joe, you're ready basically for the next step, but you are up and running. And if you got this far, and this goes for all of us, then you guys are good. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to take the screen back from Joe. We'll pause, and then we'll kind of revisit this really quickly to make sure everybody's okay. So, Joe, thank you for sharing. I am going to pause the recording. All right, folks, we just watched Joe do the install. We were talking a little bit to see who else was successful or not, or what issues they were having. We do have a mixed environment here where I have Windows people and Mac people all working on this at the same time. Just to do a refresher, Joe went through this installation process here, and we just watched him do it even with MySQL Workbench not being installed in the process. He had previously installed it and it worked just fine. So what I'm going to do at this point is on my own machine here, I am going to bring up my task manager, and I am going to go to the services tab. And what I'm looking for here is the MySQL server. You notice it's alphabetized by name of all the servers. And during the install process, you actually have the capability to create your own custom name for this if you don't like that name. You will notice that mine is currently stopped, right? So this is a conscious choice by me to not run this memory resident on my system. Okay, why? The last time I taught this class was in the fall. So during the fall, I was running it, right? And then I'm like, well, I'm not teaching it in the spring. So I turned it off. And most of the time, frankly, when I'm interfacing with the MySQL database, it's on a remote server, not on my own machine. But to demonstrate it for class, it's very helpful to have it here. Now, I'm going to right click on this service. You'll notice that I'll have the option to start this. If you don't have the option to start, and the reason I say this is, I don't know if you guys remember last week, I didn't have the option to start it from here. And what I had to do is I had to go into the Windows Services panel and set it so I could set it to start. So if you're in that situation, let me know and I can guide you. But generally, you can start, stop, or restart it from the situation. Usually once this is started and running, and you can see it said starting, and then now it says running. That's pretty much all you have to do. You can kind of close the screen and forget about it. Mine is not set to start automatically. So every time I do MySQL work locally, I have to remember to do that step. If yours is set to run automatically, great. You don't have to worry about it. If you don't want it to run automatically, you can go to, I think it's services on Windows, and then there's a whole panel here where you can make settings relative to it. And I'm just showing you very quickly. You do the properties, and then you can configure it from here as well. So I just said that very quickly, and I know for most of you it's not going to be an issue, but that is very important to know these little nuances. Now, the other aspect is this piece of software that we're going to be using, which is MySQL Workbench. MySQL Workbench, in my mind, is a fantastic product for all of the things that it does, considering that it's free. It basically gives us a way to connect to a database server and then manipulate it either through code or other software tools. So you'll notice that when you get into the product, you always land on this welcome screen, and the welcome screen is filled with what we call connection tiles. And by default, it's going to attach to your local instance, and that's the terminology we use for this, of MySQL Server running. And you'll notice that it has an account name, the address where it's located, and the port number. Localhost is kind of like the web way that we say this machine that we're currently on, right? So if you're connecting to a server environment on your own computer, that's a local host. Another way that you can also refer to it, and I don't know how well you guys can see this here, but like the IP address of a local host is the IP address of 127.0.0.1, which we call a loopback IP address, which is the numeric way of saying local host, by the way. So whenever you type 127.0.0.1 into a machine that's running its own web server, for example, it'll just load up the web server from that machine or whatever resource. But we are working with port 3306. So this tile should pre-exist in your setup, and all you have to do is click that tile, and then you are connected to your databases and all of their schemas. Right? We'll talk about what all that terminology means, but if you can even get to this screen, you are up and running and connected to your database, even if you have no database in there yet to connect to, but you are connected to the server and now able to do database work. What I'll say very quickly about the product, and we'll do a tour of it and talk about how it works and everything, including loading up a sample database, is you'll become very accustomed to this interface. It's got a few key panels that we work with. We got the schemas area, the info or properties area, the code window, and the output window. And those are the key spaces. There's other windows that you can also bring up. But generally speaking, what we do is we load our databases into this panel. We write the code for those databases here. We hit the little lightning bolts up here to run the code, and we see the results of the code down here. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And then from there on in, it's just a matter of working with the real live database. All right, we are going to go into a break mode here, and then we'll come back and start talking about databases in general. But the point of this video was to walk through the install and a very, very brief overview of the product. We'll go into a deeper overview in the next video and after break, basically. All right, so this video ends here.